What if the St. Louis Blues selected Jonathan Toews in the 2006 NHL entry draft? In the 2006 NHL entry draft, the St. Louis Blues made a colossal mistake picking Erik Johnson #1 overall. In the 2006 NHL entry draft, the St. Louis Blues held the #1 overall pick. They chose to select Erik Johnson with that pick because they thought he would be a stud defenseman. However, by picking Erik Johnson #1 overall, they passed up on a future All-Star and a top 10 player in the NHL in Jonathan Toews. To make matters worse for the St. Louis Blues, they had to watch Jonathan Toews lead Chicago Blackhawks to 3 Stanley Cups in 6 years, while Erik Johnson is now traded. St. Louis Blues fans can only think back on what if the St. Louis Blues had drafted Jonathan Toews. Had the St. Louis Blues drafted Jonathan Toews first overall in the 2006 NHL draft, the whole NHL would be different because the 2006 NHL draft was shaped out entirely different. #1 overall in 2006 would be Jonathan Toews going to the St. Louis Blues. Pittsburgh Penguins would take Erik Johnson 2nd overall, which would team him up with Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby. The reason why they take Erik Johnson is because Erik Johnson was the top-ranked skater in his draft year. Erik Johnson going to the Pittsburgh Penguins actually may be better for him because he doesn't have to be the face of the franchise. At #3, the Chicago Blackhawks no longer have the option of drafting Jonathan Toews, so then now they have the option of drafting the next best center, which is Nicklas Backstrom. Nicklas Backstrom is a pretty solid consolation prize for not being able to draft Jonathan Toews. However, Nicklas Backstrom is not the leader or the defensive player that Jonathan Toews is. The Washington Capitals have the next pick at #4. They no longer have the option of selecting Nicklas Backstrom #4, so they choose the next best center, which is Jordan Staal. Jordan Staal is no Nicklas Backstrom, but he is a solid #2 center. These changes of draft selection would have a tremendous impact on the NHL right now. The Chicago Blackhawks would still be a very good team with Nicklas Backstrom, but they would not win 3 Stanley Cups without Jonathan Toews. The Pittsburgh Penguins would still be a very solid team, but with Erik Johnson, they may not have won the 2009 Stanley Cup. Jordan Staal played a huge role in the 2009 Stanley Cup team. Erik Johnson in 2009 wasn't the player he is now, and he wasn't ready to contribute yet. Even though Jordan Staal is a huge point producer, he is a good two-way center and a clutch performer. Just like he did to Chicago, Jonathan Toews would turn the St. Louis Blues into a contender right away. He is one of those players that can completely change the culture of the franchise. Because of a draft mistake by the St. Louis Blues, the Chicago Blackhawks now have 3 Stanley Cups and a possible dynasty. This also goes to show you how one change in draft selection and one pick in history can change the course of NHL history. Next episode, what if Pavel Datsyuk was traded for Scott Gomez?